Tim Gavel, welcome to Content Group TV.
Thank you, David. Pleasure to be here.
Tim, the changes in media are profound and they're dramatic. For someone who's been with the ABC for 25 years now, what changes are you seeing and how are you adapting how you engage with the technology so as that you can provide better outcomes for your audiences?
Well, in particular, social media, you're getting a lot more instant news, and a lot of it is from the athletes themselves, whereas it had to normally go through the processes of the club and go through, the spin doctors or whatever at the club before it was vetted and put out to the media. Now you're getting the information direct from the athletes. They'll tell you how they feel. They'll tell you whether they're shattered, they're devastated, or whether or not they're elated. And they'll also tell you about injuries, whether or not they're satisfied with their lot, as we've seen with Quade Cooper and his situation with the Wallabies. So it is becoming a lot more raw to a certain degree. It's great as a news gatherer because you're getting a lot more information from many different sources, whereas in the past you used to have to wait for things to come to you sometimes, even though you'd ring them up seeking it and trying to find stories. Sometimes you get a little bit of a tidbit on Twitter or Facebook, and it might only be a sentence, but it's enough to send you in a direction to pursue a story, which you may not have thought of before. So it's very interesting at the moment, and
so it's better?
I think it's better. Yeah, it's interesting in that a lot of the stuff that's being put on social media is being put out there as fact, which we all know is not true. Some of it is fact, some of it's not. So as a journalist, you've got to be careful, and it's a trick for young journalists in particular that they see information on social media and they regard it as fact and they report it as such when it may not be fact. And part of the whole thing is that you have to check your sources, you have to check that it is the right information, and that's just part of it. But yeah, it's a bit of a minefield out there at the moment, especially for those that aren't all that experienced.
So what pressures does that bring to you as someone who is covering the round of sport?
Well, it's a lot of pressure in that if you want to be first, sometimes you can't hold on to stories anymore because of where they might break and where they might come out. So the whole idea of holding onto a story for a couple of days for a big occasion, you just can't do anymore. You've basically got to put it out there straight away. And that's part of the added pressure now, in that you've probably got to find more content. The fact is that there is so much room for content now. You've got social media, you've got the regular platforms of media, and then you've got things like different websites seeking opinions and seeking articles and whatnot. So everything is very much instant now. The only difference is that when you make a comment, for instance, if you write a comment piece, it's very much your thoughts and your feelings about things. It's important for it to be current, but you don't have to have it out there straight away. So I guess that's a little bit different, but on the flip side is that, by the time you get a comment piece out, often because we're in such a vigorous news cycle now, that it might become old news.
So is it fair to say then that really it's the quality of the content that differentiates you? Obviously timeliness is important, but you've got to get it right, and it's got to be interesting and it's got to be entertaining.
It has, yeah, and the thing is that you see a lot of stuff on social media and you chase it up, and sometimes you spend half the day chasing rabbits down holes because it's just not a story, it's speculation, it's been put on social media. So you tend to follow on social media, on Twitter in particular, people that you trust. You trust the Sydney Morning Herald, you trust the Daily Telegraph, you trust News Limited, you trust the ABC, worthy sites that have to have some editorial guidelines before they can actually put stuff out there. And then you follow the athletes and you follow the people that you need to get news from, whether it be, say, the Canberra Raiders or the West Tigers or the Brumbies or GWS or the AIS. And often they'll put stuff there before they put it anywhere else.
Is it growing, the amount of information that you have to process?
Absolutely. I mean, I find now that the information that you're getting is, from when I started 25 years ago, almost 100-fold, because in the past you used to have to wait for newspapers to come out to get leads on stories, or you had to basically go through the phone book from A to Z and just keep on ringing people in the hope that something might be happening, or or do a lot of networking. You still have to do those things. You still have to do the gumshoe stuff. But I think that what we're seeing now is that we're seeing that there is so much information out there that it's almost overwhelming. And the thing is to differentiate what is good and what is bad, and that's part of the whole thing, because there is so much out there. It's a bit like going to a huge hardware store looking for a bit of wood and you're just overwhelmed by it. But the thing is, our role, I believe, is to differentiate between what we see and make an editorial decision on what we see is decent news and what is rubbish.
What criteria do you use when you're making judgments about stories?
Well, living in Canberra, if it's a big local story, if it's a local story, full stop, you tend to go for that as one of your criteria. Another criteria is that it has to be, interesting. It has to be newsworthy, and that's the judgment that you make. When you go in there, you've got to make a split second judgment almost, because you're under the pump early in the morning to put the news out. But the other thing is the big international stories. For instance, Lance Armstrong, massive international story, so you go with that first. I mean, everybody is interested, who is interested in sport is interested in what's happening with Lance Armstrong. And you tend to go for the big stories, but if there is a Canberra angle, you add that in as well towards the back end of it. So I guess the judgment thing almost becomes second nature. You don't stop and think, oh, listen, is this newsworthy or not? After a while, you can just tell straight away. You don't need to go through, a detailed process.